But Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in the lid of it and set it beside the altar on the right side as one coming into the house of Yahweh. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of Yahweh. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags, and told the money that was found in the house of Yahweh. And they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of Yahweh, and they laid it out to the carpenters and builders that wrought upon the house of Yahweh, and to merchants and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewed stone to repair the breaches of the house of Yahweh, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Howbeit there were not made for the house of Yahweh bowls or bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessels of gold or vessels of silver, or the money that was brought into the house of Yahweh. But they gave that to the workmen, and repaired therewith the house of Yahweh. Moreover, they reckoned not with the men into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully. The trespass money and sin money was not brought into the house of Yahweh, it was the priests. Now, what this is talking about, this talks about how they used the money to help repair the house of Yahweh. We know for certainty that tithes were brought into the house of Yahweh. So if tithes were brought into the house of Yahweh, as stated in Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 38, then since tithes can be turned into money, because all tithes are is just a tenth, then I think it's safe to assume that the Hebrews back then used tithes to help repair Yahweh's house. If you can bring a tenth of your corn that you planted into Yahweh's house, then why couldn't you also bring a tenth of your money to help repair Yahweh's house? Especially when tithes can be turned into money, as stated in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 25. Now, when they were going around collecting this money from the people, take a wild guess on how much the people were putting into the chest. My guess is that they were putting 10% of their earnings in the chest, or in other words, a tenth. Now, I can't prove behind, I can't show evidence from the scriptures that when they were putting money into this chest, because if you reading these verses, it was saying that and they get, like in verse 11 it says, and they gave money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work. And in verse 10 it says, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put it up in bags. I can't prove that the money that they put in there was 10% or was a tenth, but through wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, in all likelihood, they probably did put a tenth of their earnings into that chest, because that is what a tenth is. It's just 10%. Also, notice in verses 9, well, let me hold off on going to that. So pretty much what this is establishing in 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 2 through 16, is just saying that what we had did back then in regards to Yahweh's house, they had used money to help repair Yahweh's house. And they took a chest and put money into that chest. And the money that they put in there, most likely, I can't say for 100% surety, but most likely that money came from those people paying tithes, and they were most likely using those tithes to help repair Yahweh's house, or his sanctuary, his temple. So that's just what I want to establish right there. Now let's see. Now let me go to 2 Chronicles now. I'm going to go to 2 Chronicles chapter 24. What I'm trying to prove here is that in all likelihood, when we were back in our land, that we most likely did use tithes to help repair Yahweh's house. Now I can't say for 100% surety that we did, because I don't want to add or I don't want to take away from Yahweh's scriptures. But in all likelihood, when they were help repairing Yahweh's house at that time, most likely they did that through collecting tithes. Okay? Now, in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 4 through 16, it reads, "And it came to pass after this, that Joash was minded to repair the house of Yahweh. And he gathered together the priests and the Levites, and said to them, Go out into the cities of Judah, and gather of all Israel money to repair the house of your Elohim from year to year, and see that ye hasten the matter. Howbeit the Levites hasted it not. And the king called for Jehoiada the chief, and said unto him, Why hast thou not required of the Levites to bring in out of Judah and out of Jerusalem the collection, according to the commandment of Moses, the servant of Yahweh, and of the congregation of Israel, for the tabernacle of witness? For the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, has broken up the house of Elohim, and also all the dedicated things of the house of Yahweh did they bestow upon Baalim. And at the king's commandment they made a chest, and set it without at the gate of the house of Yahweh. And they made a proclamation through Judah and Jerusalem, to bring into Yahweh the collection that Moses the servant of Elohim laid upon Israel in the wilderness. And all the princes and all the people rejoiced, and brought in, and cast into the chest, until they had made an end. And it came to pass, that at what time the chest was brought unto the king's office by the hand of the Levites, and when they saw that there was much money, the king's scribe and the high priest's officer came and emptied the chest, and took it, and carried it to its place again. Thus they did day by day, and gather money in abundance. And the king and Jehoiada gave it to such as did the work of the service of the house of Yahweh, and hired masons and carpenters to repair the house of Yahweh, and also much as wrought iron and brass to mend the house of Yahweh, to amend the house of Yahweh. So the workmen wrought, and the work was perfected by them, and they set the house of Elohim in his state, and strengthened it. And when they had finished it, they brought the rest of the money before the king and Jehoiada, whereof were made vessels for the house of Yahweh, even vessels to minister and to offer withal, and spoons, and vessels of gold and silver. And they offered burnt offerings in the house of Yahweh continually all the days of Jehoiada. But Jehoiada waxed old, and was full of days when he died. 130 years old was he when he died. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel, both toward Elohim and toward his house. Now, where is that yet? Oh, yes. Now notice in verse 9 of 2 Chronicles chapter 24, and let me read that again. It says, And they made a proclamation through Judah and Jerusalem, to bring into Yahweh the collection that Moses the servant of Elohim laid upon Israel in the wilderness. It mentions the word collection. It almost sounds like it's referring to a collection plate that is used to collect money. Just like in Nehemiah, King Joash and Jehoiada the priest did not want to forsake the house of Yahweh. The way they made sure not to forsake Yahweh's house was by using that money to repair his house, and in all likelihood, they probably used tithes to do it with. I cannot say for 100% certainty that they used tithes to repair Yahweh's house, because the word does not specifically say that tithes were used to repair the house. But with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and also a little bit of common sense, it is safe to presume that they did use tithes to help repair Yahweh's house. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Malachi chapter 3. I'm going to read verses 8 through 10. Alright, Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Verse 8 it reads, Will a man rob Elohim? Yea, ye have robbed me. But ye say, Wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith Yahweh of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, and there shall not be room enough to receive it. Now, this is asking a question on how a person, man or woman, can rob Yahweh. We all know how a man can rob another man. Somebody can go up to a guy, put a gun up to his face and say, "Give me your wallet, or give me your money." That's one example of, somebody robbing another person. The way a person robs Yahweh is not by paying tithes and not giving offering. That's how you rob Yahweh. You can't rob Yahweh by, pointing a gun up at the sky and say, "Yahweh, give me some money." That's not how you rob Yahweh. The way you rob Yahweh is by not paying tithes and giving offerings. Now, it says in verse 8, towards the bottom, it says, in tithes and offerings. That's how we are robbed Yahweh. Now, in dealing with offerings, there are different types of offerings. They include meat offerings, peace offerings, sin offerings, trespass offerings, heave offerings, burnt offerings, free will offerings. There's different types of offerings. In regards to burnt offerings, burnt offering and burnt sacrifice are both synonymous with each other. They mean the same thing. This is proven in Exodus chapter 20, verse 24, and Exodus chapter 30, verse 9, and I'll go to it real quick. Burnt offering and burnt sacrifice are synonymous with each other. They just mean the same thing. All right, Exodus chapter 20, verse 24, it reads, An altar of earth thou shalt make unto thee, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings, and thy peace offerings, thy sheep, and thy oxen, and all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. So notice it says, thou shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings. Okay? And if you go to Exodus chapter 30, verse 9, it reads, Ye shall offer no strange incense thereon, nor burnt sacrifice, nor meat offering, neither shall ye pour your drink offering thereon. So again, burnt offering, burnt sacrifice, they're all synonymous with each other. One verse has, going back to Exodus chapter 20, verse 24, one says burnt offering, and then flip right over to Exodus chapter 30, verse 9, the other one says burnt sacrifice. So one has burnt offering, one has burnt sacrifice. Again, they're both synonymous with each other. Now, as of right now, we cannot do any type of burnt offering / sacrifice here in America or anywhere else. So if we do not give a burnt offering to Yahweh, are we therefore robbing him right now? Well, the answer is no. Yahweh is not accepting burnt offerings / sacrifices right now. This is proven in Hosea chapter 3, verse 4. I'm going to go to that real quick. Hosea chapter 3. So we cannot give burnt offerings right now. Alright, Hosea chapter 3, verse 4, it says, For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without teraphim. Notice it says that children of Israel shall abide many days without a sacrifice. So we're not going to have any type of burnt sacrifice or any type of burnt offering. We can't do that right now here in America. Also, even if we could still give burnt offerings, we can only do it in the land of Israel. This is proven in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 10 through 11. And let's go there. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 10. It reads, "But when ye go over Jordan to dwell in the land which Yahweh your Elohim giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which Yahweh your Elohim shall choose to call his name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, your tithes, and heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto Yahweh." So even if we could still give burnt offerings, which we can't, we can only do that in the land of Jerusalem anyway. In Malachi chapter 3 verse 8, it does not specify what type of offering the children of Israel robbed Yahweh of. It just says offerings in general. But at least when it comes to burnt offerings, we are currently not robbing Yahweh of it by not giving burnt offerings. However, when we were allowed to give burnt offerings at that time, we did end up robbing Yahweh. According to Leviticus chapter 1, verses 2 through 3, and let me go ahead and go there and read that. Leviticus chapter 1. Alright, Leviticus chapter 1, verse 2. It reads, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, If any man of you bring an offering unto Yahweh, ye shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd, and of the flock. If his offering be a burnt sacrifice of the herd, let him offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before Yahweh." Now, according to Leviticus chapter 1, verse 2 through 3, we are supposed to offer up animals that did not have any blemish on them. And blemish is just like, well, I'll just give you the definition of it real quick, of what a blemish is. Blemish. Blemish. Oh, there's blemish. A disfiguring mark, to impair or spoil by a flaw, disfigured. So in other words, a disfiguring mark, something that's wrong on your body or body part. This is a disfiguring mark, like a flaw or something. So that's what a blemish is. So getting back to this, when we were able to, offer up animals as sacrifices, we were supposed to offer up animals that did not have any type of blemish on them at all. So when we did end up sacrificing animals, we probably kept the best animals for ourselves that we did not have, that did not, let me rephrase that. So when we did end up sacrificing animals, we probably kept the best animals for ourselves that did not have any blemishes, and sacrificed the animals that were inferior and not at all that great to Yahweh. That's one way we probably did end up robbing Yahweh back in the day when we were allowed to, offer up sacrifices and give offerings. So this is just one example of where we could have ended up robbing Yahweh by not giving the best burnt offering to him and not following all of the procedures to when it came to burnt offerings. A good example of this would be in the book of Jasher, chapter 1, verse 15 through 16. Now I do have the book of Jasher here, and I'm going to read about where Cain and Abel gave an offering, and Yahweh had respect unto Abel's offering, but not unto Cain's. So let me go to the book of Jasher. I'm going to go to chapter 1 and read 15 through 16. Verse 15 it reads, "And it was at the expiration of a few years that they brought an approximating offering to Yahweh, and Cain brought from the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought from the firstlings of his flock, from the fat thereof. And Elohim turned and inclined to Abel and to his offering, and a fire came down from Yahweh from heaven and consumed it. And unto Cain and his offering Yahweh did not turn, and he did not incline to it, for he had brought from the inferior fruit of the ground before Yahweh. And Cain was jealous against his brother Abel on account of this, and he sought a pretext to slay him." So when Cain had gave offering to Yahweh, he gave from the inferior fruit. He didn't give the best of his, of his crops, of his food. He gave in something very inferior that was worthless. And that's pretty much an example of how Cain ended up robbing Yahweh. He didn't give the best of what he had. Cain, I'm sure he had plenty of good fruits and good crops that he could have gave Yahweh, but he kept the best for himself and gave the inferior to Yahweh. And that's just one example of what we probably did back in the day when we were in our homeland, when we were in Israel, when we were in Jerusalem, and we were giving sacrifices and making burnt offerings. We probably kept the good animals for ourselves and gave the inferior animals that had like blemishes to Yahweh. And that's just one example of how we end up robbing Yahweh. And that's why it says in Malachi chapter 3 verses 10, where it says, "Ye have robbed me, even as whole nations. You robbed me in tithes and offerings." And that's just one example in regards to offerings of how we could have robbed Yahweh. Okay? Now, in dealing with tithes, since we cannot pay certain kinds of tithes, such as the year-to-year tithes and the 3-year tithes, when we were allowed to pay tithes, when we were in our land, we may have robbed Yahweh by not giving 10% of our corn to the Levite as required by law, according to Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 23 and verse 28 through 29. We may instead have given only 2% and kept the rest of the 8% of the corn to ourselves. This may have been what Yahweh was referring to when he said that this whole nation has robbed him. The way you rob Yahweh is not by taking something away from Yahweh that belongs to him, because according to Job chapter 41 verse 11, everything in the world belongs to him. And let me go to that real quick. Go to Job chapter chapter 41 verse 11. Job chapter 41 verse 11, it reads, "Who hath prevented me that I shall repay him? Whatsoever is under the whole heaven is mine." So, because according to Job chapter 41 verse 11, everything in the world belongs to him. It is instead by not giving to Yahweh what belongs to him already, which is the 10th, or in other words, tithes, and this includes offerings as well. In Malachi chapter 3 verse 10, when it says bring all the tithes, it is referring to every single type of tithe that there is, because it says let me rephrase that. In Malachi chapter 3 verse 10, when it says bring all the tithes, it is referring to every single type of tithe that there is, because it says the word tithes. This includes money, because tithes can be turned into money. So when you bring the money into the storehouse, what do you think that money is going to be used for? It is going to be used to buy food so you can feed the Levite, the stranger, the widow, and fatherless, because that is what tithes were used for. Okay?